In a quiet, unassuming town, there once lived a young girl who cherished a blissful life alongside her loving mother. Every moment was a treasure, every day a chapter in their story of love and laughter. But one fateful day shattered that serene existence, tearing apart the innocence of the little girl and forever altering the course of her life. This is a story of unimaginable heartbreak, resilience, and discovery, an emotional journey of a young girl as she uncovers hidden truths and confronts profound sorrow. Let's delve into this deeply moving tale. And as you listen, do share where you're tuning in from. Lila, a lively and imaginative 5-year-old, adored her mother, Claire. Their life, though modest, overflowed with love and warmth. Claire always went the extra mile to make Lila feel special, whether by cooking her favorite dishes, helping her tackle tricky homework, or weaving magical bedtime stories to lull her to sleep. On sunny days, they would embark on long walks, hand in hand, marveling at the beauty of nature, collecting leaves, chasing butterflies, and laughing at silly jokes only they understood. For Lila, Claire wasn't just her mother, she was her entire world. Their evenings were a sanctuary of creativity, spent drawing pictures, reading stories, and basking in each other's company. But life, as it often does, threw an unforeseen twist. On what seemed like an ordinary morning, the course of their lives changed forever. That day began like any other, with Lila excitedly preparing for school. She couldn't wait to share her weekend adventures with her friends. Claire, as always, prepared her favorite sandwich, gave her a warm hug, and kissed her forehead at the door. "I'll pick you up later, sweetheart," Claire said with her radiant smile. Little did Lila know that this moment would be the last time she would ever see her mother smile. By late afternoon, Lila was called to the principal's office. Confused, she entered the room to find her father, David, standing by the window. His hands were buried deep in his pockets, and his gaze seemed lost in the distance. When Lila walked in, he turned to her, his expression pained and heavy with unspoken words. "Lila," he began, his voice trembling, "there's something I need to tell you." She stared up at him, her heart pounding. "Your mother, she had an accident. She's no longer with us." The words hit Lila like a tidal wave. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper, trembling with fear and disbelief. David struggled to meet her gaze. "She's gone, Lila," he said, his tone devoid of comfort. "There's nothing we can do." That evening, the house that once radiated warmth and love felt unbearably cold and desolate. Lila sat on her bed, clutching the teddy bear her mother had given her, replaying those dreadful words over and over. "Gone," she whispered into the silence, unable to fathom a world without her mother. The shadows on the walls seemed darker, the air heavier, and the emptiness overwhelming. Outside her window, the world carried on as if nothing had happened. But for Lila, time had stopped. The once cozy home felt like a hollow shell, echoing with the memories of laughter that now seemed like a lifetime ago. David, overwhelmed with his own grief, grew distant and cold. He barely spoke to Lila, offering no solace. One evening, as she sat clutching a pillow on the couch, he glanced at her and said, "You'll need to be strong. Things have changed, and we have to move forward." Then he retreated to his room, leaving her alone in the suffocating silence. Nights were the hardest. Without Claire's soothing bedtime stories, Lila found herself staring at the ceiling, tears streaming down her face. Her mother's faint perfume lingered in the air, a bittersweet reminder of the love she had lost. Sometimes she would sit by the window, tracing raindrops with her fingers, imagining her mother's comforting voice whispering words of encouragement. Weeks passed, each day feeling heavier than the last. Mary, Lila's grandmother, visited after Claire's passing. Seeing Lila's frail frame and hollow eyes broke Mary's heart. The once vibrant house now seemed lifeless, the colorful drawings on the walls dulled by grief. Mary noticed the neglect almost immediately. David's indifference was impossible to ignore. "How are you, sweetheart?" Mary asked gently, sitting beside Lila one afternoon. "I'm fine, Grandma," Lila replied, but her voice lacked any conviction. Mary held her cold hands and felt the weight of her sadness. Determined to help, Mary began visiting more frequently, but her presence only seemed to irritate David. One evening, Mary found Lila sitting on the kitchen floor, eating a dry sandwich. "Why are you eating this? Didn't your dad make you dinner?" she asked, her voice tinged with concern. Lila's tearful response shattered her. "He said he didn't have time," the little girl whispered. Mary's heart ached, and she resolved to act. Despite her limited finances, she began documenting the neglect, empty fridges, Lila's stories of loneliness, and photos of the lifeless home. She knew she might need these as evidence if she sought custody. When David discovered Mary's plans, he was livid. Storming into her home, he demanded, "You think you can take my daughter from me?" But Mary stood her ground. "Lila needs love and care, David, and you're not giving her that." In response, David began a calculated campaign to appear as a devoted father. He bought Lila expensive toys, promised trips to the mall, and showered her with attention. But Lila, though young, sensed something wasn't right. His sudden kindness felt forced and insincere. One night, Lila overheard David on a phone call. "I need this to look convincing. If Mary wins custody, I'm done for." His words sent chills down her spine. He spoke about fabricating evidence to portray Mary as unfit, and even mentioned the life insurance money from Claire's death. "That money's the real prize," he said coldly. "I'll make it seem like it's for Lila, but we both know it's not." Lila's stomach churned as she realized the truth. Her father's actions weren't about love or care. They were about control and greed. The toys and gifts meant nothing. What Lila longed for was her mother's warmth, her stories, her unconditional love. And so the little girl, caught in a web of grief and manipulation, clung to the hope that her grandmother would save her from the darkness that had engulfed her once happy world. Terrified and utterly heartbroken, Lila crept back to her small room. Every step felt like climbing a mountain, her fragile frame trembling with the weight of what she had overheard. Once inside, she collapsed onto her bed, pulling her knees to her chest, as tears silently streaked down her face. The words she had heard cut through her like sharp blades, each one shattering the fragile trust she had clung to. The father she had longed to rely on wasn't protecting her, he was using her. Piece by piece, she began to connect the dots. The sudden gifts, the forced smiles, and the unexpected outings were all a facade, a carefully constructed performance. It was never real, she whispered to herself, her voice barely audible over the sound of her sobs. Her once cozy room, filled with memories of her mother, now felt like a cage. But even amidst her fear and sadness, something else began to stir within her. A resolve, faint but growing. She knew she couldn't let David succeed in his schemes. Lila resolved to protect herself and her grandmother, even if it meant facing the overwhelming challenge of standing up to her father. That night, as the shadows on her ceiling shifted and danced, she barely slept. With every sleepless moment, she worked to formulate a plan to speak her truth and fight for the love and safety she desperately needed. The day of the hearing arrived with a mix of tension and determination. Lila sat beside Mary in the courthouse, clutching her grandmother's hand tightly. The grandeur of the room, with its towering ceilings and imposing wooden doors, made the moment feel even heavier. David, dressed sharply and exuding false confidence, presented his case with the help of his lawyer. Together, they painted a picture of a devoted father who had stepped up during difficult times. They cast doubt on Mary's abilities, emphasizing her age and limited finances in an attempt to discredit her as a suitable guardian. Mary, sitting straight but trembling slightly, remained silent as her lawyer presented a different story, a story grounded in truth. They revealed David's financial manipulation, highlighting his attempts to control Claire's life insurance money. The evidence was undeniable, with documents and testimonies painting a clear picture of neglect and selfish intent. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for, Lila's turn to take the stand. The room seemed to hold its collective breath as the small girl, no more than a child, walked to the front. Her steps were hesitant but deliberate, her resolve visible despite the fear in her wide eyes. Climbing onto the seat, she looked directly at the judge, her small hands gripping the edge of the stand. "He doesn't care about me," she began, her voice shaky but filled with raw emotion. "All he wants is the money. I heard him say it. He doesn't love me or my mom. He just wants everything for himself." The room fell silent. David shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his confident facade cracking under the weight of Lila's words. Tears rolled down Lila's cheeks as she continued, her voice growing steadier with each sentence. "My grandma takes care of me. She loves me, and she talks about my mom so I won't forget her. But my dad, he doesn't even say her name." The judge leaned forward, her expression softening as she addressed Lila. "Thank you, Lila. That was very brave of you." Moments later, the sound of the gavel echoed through the courtroom, signaling a critical decision. The judge ordered an investigation into Lila's claims and granted Mary temporary custody. As the decision was announced, Lila turned to Mary, who wrapped her in a warm embrace. For the first time in what felt like forever, Lila felt a glimmer of hope, a faint light piercing through the darkness. Returning to Mary's modest home, Lila experienced a sense of safety she hadn't felt in weeks. Mary worked tirelessly to create a nurturing environment, filling their days with warmth and care. She continued Claire's bedtime story tradition, weaving tales that kept Lila connected to her mother's memory. Every corner of Mary's home radiated comfort and familiarity, a haven for Lila's healing heart. At a park Claire had once loved, Mary watched as Lila laughed and played, her laughter ringing out like a melody Mary hadn't heard in far too long. "You're my strong girl," Mary said, holding Lila close. "And you're strong too, Grandma," Lila replied, her smile shining through tears. Together, they began to rebuild their lives, one day at a time. Each small victory brought them closer to a future filled with hope. Lila made new friends, shared memories of her mother, and even found herself smiling again. Though challenges remained, they faced them with unwavering strength and love. Evenings at Mary's home were filled with laughter, whether they were cooking dinner together or playing board games. The future wasn't just brighter, it was theirs to create, built on a foundation of love, resilience, and the enduring memory of Claire. How does Lila's incredible journey resonate with you? Her bravery and determination remind us of the power of hope in the face of adversity. If you were in Mary's shoes, would you have found the strength to fight for Lila against all odds? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And as always, thank you for being part of Storyline Narratives.